Breaking news. The Supreme Court has just issued a decision that will reshape the landscape of gun rights and regulations across the United States, in a move that legal experts are calling one of the most significant rulings on the Second Amendment in decades. The court has dramatically changed how Americans can carry firearms in public. In a 6-3 decision, the justices struck down century-old concealed carry laws, overturning long-standing legal precedents that have shaped gun policy for generations. This ruling marks a pivotal moment in the ongoing debate over gun control and individual rights. The case at the center of this decision, New York State Rifle and Pistol Association Incorn versus Bruin, challenged New York's requirement that individuals must demonstrate a proper cause or special need to obtain a concealed carry permit. The Supreme Court's ruling eliminates this requirement, making it significantly easier for law-abiding citizens to carry handguns in public for self-defense. States like New York and California, which have some of the strictest gun laws in the country, can no longer use subjective standards to limit who can receive a concealed carry permit. This means that millions of residents in these states may soon have broader access to concealed firearms, fundamentally altering the way local governments regulate guns. Gun rights advocates are hailing this decision as a major victory, celebrating outside the Supreme Court and across the nation. They argue that the ruling restores constitutional rights that have been restricted for too long, and see it as a reaffirmation of the Second Amendment's core protections. On the other side, gun control supporters are voicing deep concern. They warn that loosening restrictions on concealed carry could lead to more gun violence, increased risks in public spaces, and greater uncertainty for communities already grappling with the impact of firearms. Vigils and protests have sprung up in response, as advocates call for new measures to address gun safety. In the wake of the ruling, lawmakers and law enforcement agencies are scrambling to adapt. State legislatures are rushing to rewrite laws and close perceived loopholes, while police departments are updating their procedures to comply with the new legal standards. The decision has set off a wave of legislative activity and policy debates from coast to coast. The Supreme Court's decision establishes a new, complex legal standard for evaluating gun regulations. Legal experts predict that this will lead to years of litigation, as courts across the country interpret and apply the ruling to a wide range of existing and future laws. The result is likely to be a patchwork of regulations, with ongoing legal battles shaping the future of gun policy in America. As the nation grapples with this historic change, the future of public safety and gun regulation in America is now more uncertain than ever. Communities, lawmakers, and citizens alike are left to navigate a new era where the balance between individual rights and collective security will be tested in ways not seen for over a century. In a landmark decision that will echo through the legal and political landscape for years to come, Justice Clarence Thomas, writing for the majority of the Supreme Court, declared that the right to carry a firearm in public is not just a privilege, but a fundamental right fully protected by both the Second and 14th Amendments of the U.S. Constitution. This ruling marks a dramatic expansion of gun rights, shifting the legal understanding of the Second Amendment from the home into the public sphere, and setting a new precedent for how courts must interpret gun regulations. The decision directly strikes down proper cause requirements in several states, which together are home to roughly a quarter of the U.S. population. Previously, residents in these states had to demonstrate a unique or heightened threat to their safety in order to obtain a permit to carry a concealed firearm in public. Now, that barrier has been removed, meaning that ordinary citizens no longer need to justify their desire to carry a gun outside the home. This change will have immediate and far-reaching effects, as millions of Americans in states like New York, California, and New Jersey will see their local gun laws upended overnight. Justice Thomas argued forcefully that no other constitutional right, such as free speech or religious liberty, requires citizens to show a special need before exercising it. By making this comparison, the court elevated the right to bear arms to the same level as other fundamental freedoms, insisting that the government cannot single out gun rights for special restrictions. This reasoning places the Second Amendment on equal footing with the First, fundamentally altering the legal landscape for future cases. The ruling builds on the court's previous landmark decisions in Heller and McDonald, which affirmed the right to possess firearms for self-defense within the home. But now, for the first time, the Supreme Court has extended those rights beyond the threshold of one's residence, declaring that the Constitution protects the right to carry firearms in public spaces as well. This expansion is seen by many as a seismic shift in the interpretation of the Second Amendment. However, not all justices agreed with this sweeping change. The dissenting justices issued a stark warning, arguing that the decision would severely limit the ability of states and local governments to address the pressing issue of gun violence, especially in densely populated urban areas where the risks are highest. They cautioned that removing these long-standing restrictions could make it harder for law enforcement to keep communities safe. The court's new standard for evaluating gun laws moves away from the previous approach of balancing public safety against individual rights. Instead, the majority opinion insists that only regulations consistent with the nation's historical tradition of firearm regulation are permissible. This means that courts must now look to the history and tradition of gun laws in America, rather than weighing modern policy concerns. As a result, this shift sets a much higher bar for any future gun regulations to survive legal challenges. Laws that once seemed reasonable or necessary for public safety may now be struck down if they lack a clear historical precedent. This will likely lead to a wave of new lawsuits and legal battles as states and cities attempt to defend their gun control measures in court. The Bruen decision fundamentally changes the way all Second Amendment challenges will be judged nationwide. Legal analysts predict that this ruling will spark a new era of litigation, as courts across the country grapple with its implications. The decision not only reshapes the legal landscape, but also reignites the national debate over the balance between individual rights and public safety in America. The ruling forced states like New York and California into emergency sessions to rewrite their gun laws. Old may-issue systems, which gave officials broad discretion, are now unconstitutional. Law enforcement faces new challenges, distinguishing legal carriers from criminals and updating training protocols overnight. Police must now verify permits under more complex rules, increasing their workload and uncertainty. Urban communities fear more guns will lead to more violence, while rural areas see the ruling as a win for self-defense. Permit applications have surged, overwhelming local offices and creating backlogs. The transition has been chaotic, with inconsistent rules and confusion for both citizens and officials. The divide between gun rights and gun control is now sharper than ever. Gun rights groups hail the decision as a victory for constitutional freedom, arguing it empowers law-abiding citizens to protect themselves. They believe restrictive laws only disarm the innocent, not criminals, and that more armed citizens deter crime. Gun control advocates, however, warn the ruling will lead to more shootings and make public spaces less safe. They cite data linking more guns to more violence, especially in cities. Public health officials argue the decision undermines efforts to reduce gun deaths and injuries. The ruling has deepened the divide, with both sides vowing to keep fighting for their vision of public safety. The Supreme Court replaced the old balancing test with a strict history and tradition standard for gun laws. Now, any regulation must have a clear historical analog from the 18th or 19th centuries to be constitutional. This forces judges to act as historians, searching for old laws to justify modern regulations. Critics argue this approach is unworkable and ignores the realities of modern firearms. The dissent warned it ties lawmakers' hands in addressing today's gun violence. Lower courts are now split, with some upholding new restrictions and others striking them down based on differing historical interpretations. The result is a confusing, chaotic legal landscape. The fate of many gun laws now depends on how judges read history, not on their real-world impact. In New York, the Supreme Court's Bruen decision sent shockwaves through the state's legal and political landscape. Lawmakers responded almost immediately, passing a series of new laws that banned firearms in a wide range of sensitive places, such as public transit, parks, and entertainment venues. These laws also introduced more rigorous requirements for obtaining a concealed carry permit, including mandatory firearm safety training and thorough background checks. The changes were designed to maintain public safety in a state long known for its strict gun control, but they also sparked confusion and debate among residents and officials alike. Almost as soon as the new measures were signed into law, gun rights groups mobilized. They filed lawsuits challenging the constitutionality of these restrictions, arguing that the new rules went too far and infringed on Second Amendment rights. This set off a fresh wave of legal battles, with both sides preparing for lengthy court fights that could ultimately reach the Supreme Court once again. The impact of the Bruen decision wasn't limited to New York. In California and Hawaii, states with similarly strict gun laws, the ruling forced a sudden and dramatic overhaul of long-standing permit systems. Overnight, decades-old regulations were dismantled, leaving state and local governments scrambling to adapt. Residents, many of whom had never considered applying for a permit before, found themselves navigating a rapidly changing legal landscape. Local officials were quickly overwhelmed by a surge in new permit applications. Government offices, already stretched thin, struggled to keep up with the demand. This sudden influx strained resources and created a sense of uncertainty and anxiety in communities that had grown accustomed to strict gun control. Many residents worried about what these changes would mean for public safety and the character of their neighborhoods. In response, state legislatures raced to draft new regulations that would comply with the Supreme Court's ruling while still aiming to prevent gun violence. Lawmakers held emergency sessions. Policy experts worked late into the night, and public hearings drew passionate testimony from both supporters and opponents of stricter gun laws. The challenge was to find a balance between constitutional rights and community safety. The Bruen decision has forced a fundamental reordering of public safety policy in some of the nation's largest and most influential states. Police departments and city officials are re-evaluating their strategies, trying to adapt to a new reality where more people may be legally carrying firearms in public spaces. The ripple effects are being felt in city halls, police stations, and neighborhoods across the country. Legislative action and lawsuits continue to unfold, with the rest of the country watching closely. Other states are monitoring these developments, considering how the precedent might affect their own laws and policies. The legal landscape is shifting, and no one is quite sure where it will settle. The precedent set by the Bruen decision will shape the future of gun control in America for years to come. As courts, lawmakers, and communities grapple with its implications, the nation stands at a crossroads, facing tough questions about rights, safety, and the meaning of the Second Amendment in modern society. The Supreme Court allowed bans on guns in sensitive places, but gave little guidance on what qualifies. States responded by designating a wide range of gun-free zones, from subways to Times Square. Gun rights advocates argue these broad restrictions defy the court's intent and make carrying in public nearly impossible. Lawsuits have flooded the courts, with judges issuing conflicting rulings on what's constitutional. The result is a patchwork of rules that change from one jurisdiction to the next. The true boundaries of public carry rights remain unsettled, likely requiring another Supreme Court decision. Before Bruen, states used may-issue systems, letting officials deny permits based on subjective criteria. The ruling forces these states to adopt shall-issue systems, where permits must be granted if objective requirements are met. Most states already use this approach, but now it's the national standard. Some states go further, allowing permitless carry for law-abiding citizens. The shift from may issue to shall issue is the most direct legal change from Bruen, limiting government discretion. The right to carry is now the default, with the state's role reduced to checking clear, objective criteria. This change has redrawn the legal map and set the stage for new battles over the details of gun regulation. The Supreme Court's decision has answered one question: public carry is a right, but opened many more. Courts and states are struggling to apply the new history-based standard, creating confusion and uncertainty. The core debate remains: individual self-defense versus collective public safety. Supporters see Bruen as restoring liberty, opponents see it as a threat to community well-being. The ruling didn't end the gun debate, it just moved it to new ground. How America balances rights and safety in this new era will define the nation for years to come.